So a little while ago on my Twitter account, I saw somebody say that if you can't finish the Conjuring movies, then you're not a true horror fan. You know, as if the horror community got together in secrecy and dubbed this guy the one true king. They didn't. He then goes on to say, watch Cannibal Holocaust and get back to me. You know, because there's no better way to teach someone how to swim than dropping them immediately into the deep end of the pool. Look, buddy, if you're just gonna sleep at the bottom of the pool, then you're not really a true swimming fan. Cannibal Holocaust is always one of those movies that edgelords have in their back pocket because they think it makes themselves look more interesting, and it doesn't. What's next? Martyrs? High Tension? Cannibal Holocaust is purely one of those I had to let you know that I know that movie exists. So, as someone who has seen Cannibal Holocaust, do you send me a trophy or a medal in the mail? How does this work? Cannibal Holocaust is a infamous film, to say the least. After it premiered in 1980, director Ruggero Deodato was brought up on murder charges thanks to the footage looking so realistic. Deodato took inspiration from the Mondo films, a series of Italian films from the 1970s that attempt to sensationalize depictions of foreign lifestyle being staged under a sheen of a pseudo-documentary. He made it into the contract that the actors killed on screen were to disappear after the shoot, to create the illusion that they had actually died. After they showed up in court, Deodato was released. Similarities can be seen in other faux documentaries like The Blair Witch Project, with actors hiding after the film's release to further make it look genuine. Sure, for 1980, Cannibal Holocaust was pretty heavy. It featured grainy footage, unknown actors, and realistic gore effects, which in some situations still hold up today. But considering the kind of stuff circulating on the internet now, this is pretty tame in comparison. So welcome to Dylan Has Movies. I'm Dylan, I have movies, and today we're talking about a handful of cannibal films because they're not really getting made that often anymore, and I can kind of understand why. Now, these movies aren't your Texas Chainsaw or Silence of the Lambs kind of cannibals, featuring backwoods inbreds and high-profile socialites. No, these are tribes of people resorting to what we in the Western world would consider to be savagery. And it wouldn't be acceptable to paint these people in this kind of light anymore. This is all wild embellishment. But enough about all that. We're here to talk about cannibal movies. We are going to watch Eaten Alive. I am finally appropriately dressed for something. This movie was released less than 2 months after the success of Cannibal Holocaust. But it doesn't use the Mondo Macabro-style documentary filmmaking that Holocaust did. It's actually structured like an actual film, and it works pretty well for the most part. It's schlocky and gross, and it does live up to the hype of Italian cannibal films. Directed by Umberto Lenzi, who was credited with creating the very first cannibal film, Man from Deep River, also known as Sacrifice, in 1972, like Holocaust, this one doesn't shy away from intense violence, rape, and animal cruelty scenes. The film follows Sheila, played by Janet Agron, who approaches local police over the concern for her missing sister Diana. Unbeknownst to her, she joined a Jim Jones-like cult and disappeared into the jungles of New Guinea. Sheila flees to New Guinea and hires Mark, played by Robert Kerman, who you'll remember from his role as Professor Harold Monroe in Cannibal Holocaust. You will see him again before this video is finished, I assure you. Mark is offered a considerable amount of money to help locate the missing Diana, and he begrudgingly goes along with it. The most interesting thing that Eaten Alive has going for it is the inspiration taken from the People's Temple led by Jim Jones in the 1970s. Keep in mind that the Jonestown mass suicide happened in 1978, and this movie was released in 1980, so the events were still pretty fresh in the minds of the audience. Sheila discovers that her sister ran away to follow a New Age cult leader named Jonas, who uses his power and position to essentially run a sex cult, where he preys upon female members of the village. He preaches removing things that go in conflict with God's nature. So naturally, cannibalism, rape, cassette tapes, murder, they're all a-okay with him. Upon their arrival, Jonas takes a liking to Sheila and quickly makes her fall for him, while Diana's spell of attraction is broken almost immediately from seeing her sister. Yeah, it's stupid, but this isn't a movie that people watch for intelligent script writing. You'll also learn that a lot of these cannibal films steal footage from others. Scenes from Man from Deep River, Last Cannibal World, and The Mountain of the Cannibal God are even featured in Eaten Alive. Eventually, Mark, Sheila, and Diana work together to escape the cult and run through the jungle, but Diana and a local girl are caught, raped, and eaten alive. They make their way back to safety, catch a couple helicopters back to New York. All the while, Jonas and the rest of the cult and villagers commit a mass suicide, much like the People's Temple, and that was Eaten Alive. In comparison to Cannibal Holocaust, this film is considerably considerably tamer, save for a couple of things. So like Cannibal Holocaust, Eaten Alive was meant to shock audience members. It was to portray tribespeople as savages, with all the gruesome details of their lives left intact. So the scenes with animal abuse are real, and that's my main problem with the film. The film throws in scenes of animals being killed every so often, just a couple minutes between them, to remind audience members that they're watching shock trash. Eaten Alive is not trying to win any awards, it's not trying to get an Oscar nomination, it's there to make money. There's no contextual justification for these scenes to be thrown in. There's a moment where they're floating downriver on a raft, and just suddenly there's footage of a live monkey being swallowed by a snake, and it's fighting for its life for no reason. It's like I was to cut scenes of car crashes in between me talking about movies. No justification, and they're just there now. Credit due where credit is due. Eaten Alive isn't that bad. It's got an atmosphere, and it is a product of its time, and it was made to be upsetting. Its notoriety was to be spread via word of mouth, though due to how closely it was released to Cannibal Holocaust, it was quickly overshadowed by the former's success, so it's not that talked about very much these days. However, it did get a Blu-ray release from Severin Films in 2018, so people still know about it, but for the most part, the film begins well, and there are a few moments throughout the film that do keep it from being boring, and if the scenes of the animals being killed were removed, then perhaps this could have been a better appreciated film. Because it's not a bad flick, the acting is wonderfully campy, the gore effects used for the cannibalizing scenes look great, and the musical score all kick ass, so it does have some merit to it. So that was Umberto Lenzi's Eaten Alive. It's not great, it's not bad, it's just a middle-of-the-road cannibal film. It's a serviceable gore fest with lots of bare breasts and bums to take a look at, and you'll come to find that that is a staple of the genre. Topless women. So let's check out something else. How about Cannibal Ferox? This whole video is going to be just Umberto Lenzi films, isn't it? At the time of its release, Cannibal Ferox's United States distributor tried to sell the movie as being the most violent film of all time, and like I said for the previous films, for the time of its release, yeah, I guess so. Italian films, especially the ones in the horror genre, are known by many different names, and Ferox was no different, having been released as Make Them Die Slowly and Woman from Deep River. But whatever title it is, you can rest assured you are watching the same stuff. Cannibal Ferox follows the same basic plot structure of the other exploitation films. A group of naive white people travel to some exotic place that they have no business being in, and terrible shit happens. This time, siblings Gloria and Rudy travel with their friend Patricia to the rainforest for her dissertation on how cannibalism is a myth, and they're all about to find out the hard way that perhaps she should have written about something else. Now, there's something to be said about Cannibal Ferox, and that is, it is way more mean-spirited than Eaten Alive. Now, we're supposed to identify with these characters. They're murdering, raping, torturing indigenous people for absolutely no discernible reason. Even the animal killing scenes in this one are considerably worse than Lenzi's previous work. The camera holds nothing back as the animals are being tortured and murdered on screen. It's glorifying levels of violence, and it's almost like it's pornography. It's just really gross. Eaten Alive and Cannibal Ferox not only share some footage of animal deaths, sets, and actors, but there's also a similar subplot about one of the men our protagonists meet in the jungle having ripped off some mobsters back in New York, which ties the story back to the United States. Well, the scene in which the woman is questioned at the police precinct is the same office used in Eaten Alive, where Sheila gets news about her sister. Police officer Lieutenant Rizzo is played by Robert Kerman. Remember that I told you you'd see him again before this video was over? Well, I keep my promises. Rudy, Gloria, and Pat meet a pair of men running for their lives from a group of presumed cannibals. Enter Joe and Mike. Mike being the guy that ripped off the mobsters. The pair fled to Panagua in the hopes of scoring cocaine and uncut emeralds, hoping to become rich, but their dreams become quashed when they piss off a group of indigenous tribesmen. Eventually, the group is captured and they're slowly killed one by one until Gloria is the sole surviving member of the group, and she heads home after being rescued by a pair of trappers. Only then does she realize maybe she should just lie about what she saw in the jungle. And the film ends with her covering up the events of what happened. That's a good idea. Your friends and family died for nothing. And that's basically all there is to Cannibal Ferox. It's not bad either. It's just underwhelming and mean-spirited for the sake of being mean-spirited. Though the plot is a little tighter, it's a little bit better than Eaten Alive. But it still has that stupid ex machina ending with the subplot characters from New York coming over to save the characters that are stuck in the jungle. Now, just like I mentioned before, Lindsay's previous work, this one features the scenes of animal torture, and again, Lindsay is retreading the same ground. The worst scene comes with a group of tribesmen. They're pulling a turtle out of the water, and they start hacking it to pieces with its limbs, and the camera just doesn't move off of it. It's actually really disturbing. I love turtles. Turtles are one of my favorites, so it's not the best thing to watch. Granted, these men do cook and eat the turtle, so it's not just, filming it for nothing. But you probably didn't have to. And that was Cannibal Ferox. So jumping ahead a couple years, let's take a look at Massacre in Dinosaur Valley, originally known as Nudo e Selvaggio, which translates to Naked and Savage. It's a weird title, I know, but once you see it, it makes sense. Written and directed by Michel Massimo Tarantini, Massacre in Dinosaur Valley is about 88 minutes. All jokes aside, this is a pretty forgettable film, and it really shows. Out of all the movies I've talked about today, Massacre is easily the most underwhelming and tame out of the bunch. The film follows an assorted group of travelers whose plane crashes in the jungle, and they're now forced to work together to survive while in a wandering tribe of cannibals' hunting grounds. It's pretty much your standard paint-by-numbers plot of naive, unprepared travelers being in places they shouldn't. I've mentioned this before, but plots in these kind of movies are pretty inconsequential. Because a lot of these Italian films get localized by a lot of different distributors. You've got them under a lot of different English names. Cannibal Ferox was known as Woman from Deep River to further cement its relationship to Umberto Lenzi's original 1972 film, which kicked this whole thing into high gear. And Massacre in Dinosaur Valley even went by Cannibal Ferox 2, despite the connection to the first film being absolutely non-existent. These are two completely different films. It is just trying to piggyback off the previous film's success. There's a lot of that with Italian cinema. 3 examples are over my shoulder, if you notice them. But it's also a great way to distribute a banned film by giving it a completely different name. A lot of distributors and censors wouldn't even know what they've got a hold of, and releasing it under many different titles helps get it across the border. Now, if you're like me, a rational person, who saw the title of the movie and assumed that perhaps this might be one of those films where a group of tribal people are somehow still living in the Stone Age with dinosaurs, then prepare to be disappointed because there isn't a single dinosaur to be found. Instead, the name comes from the assumption that the local valley is a hotbed for dinosaur bones, some of which our oafish main characters are looking for. Our main hero, Kevin, is looking to score some to make some money, and the professor and his daughter are on some sort of expedition. I'm not sure if it was ever really clear or fully explained what they were doing. I probably wasn't paying too close attention, if I'm being honest. Now, the main issue with most of the characters in the films of this genre is, aside from the appointed hero, they all just kind of fade into the background and become this uninteresting group of people whose only purpose is to become food for the cannibals. The film takes some kind of weird turn during the first act where it becomes this slapstick movie for a moment. Kevin's getting his ass kicked by 2 really large men while trying to defend a woman's honor. It's just really weird now. And of course, all of this is superfluous to the plot, and I'm honestly finding it a tad bit difficult to recount the film because I've already forgotten so much of it. It really was that boring for me. So after their plane crashes and they make their way through the jungle, they find, miraculously enough, a group of Westerners who speak their language, and they have a camp set up. Much like Eaten Alive. Now, the group is there to mine diamonds and other precious stones, so I guess there is a connection to Cannibal Ferox, but it's tenuous at best. Now, the leader, known as China, is using forced labor to harvest these stones, and he realizes that once Kevin and these 2 undressed women stumble upon their scheme, they can't leave, because they might tell the authorities and then bust the group. So they keep them hostage, at least for a little while. But Kevin and the 2 ladies are not amused by this, so they steal a boat and they make haste. Now, it might seem like I'm kind of rushing through this one, and I kind of am. It's only because it's just not overly fun. It's not really a memorable movie. There's just very little meat in this gym mat. Massacre in Dinosaur Valley could have earned a few more points in my books if it actually had dinosaurs in it. The artwork on the poster is deliberately misleading, which isn't anything new when it comes to posters, and the film clearly didn't have the budget for costumes or animatronics of that kind, but fast forwarding 9 years later and seeing Tammy and the T-Rex hit theaters, you can't convince me that we weren't shafted here. It's by far the weakest film we've watched today, but it's still, with a group of friends, it's not a bad time. It's okay. So that's about it. That's about all I have to say for these films. But to be honest, I had a bit of fun watching them for the research for this video, and there are a few more Cannibal Exploitation films that exist out there. And I'm eager to talk about things, so there's probably a good chance I've already started writing a second video that's a follow-up to this. So, if you did enjoy this, you could subscribe to the channel. You don't have to. I'm not doing this for views. I just like to talk about movies. If you don't want to subscribe, that's fine. I don't really care that much. But with that said, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.